Hello, I'm Nora St. John with Balanced Body, and this is number 7 in our Active Office podcast series. In this sequence, we're going to focus on the hands and the fingers. We've looked at our shoulders, our posture, our upper arms, and now our forearms with our wrists. Now we're going to look at the hands and work on balance, strength, and support for the whole lowest part of the hands. Now, one of the things that is critical to know is most of us, if we're sitting in an office, are spending a lot of time in some position like this. Fingers on a keyboard, fingers on a smartphone, something like that, where we tend to have a flexed grip of our fingers. We're often stuck in one position for a long period of time, which would create a lot of imbalances in both the mobility and the strength of the fingers. Because of that, we'll just do some simple sequences that you can do in the car on your way to work, you can do at the end of your day, the beginning of your day, that will often help to decrease the stress and the pain that can sometimes accumulate when you do a lot of work at a computer or with a smartphone. So we'll start here with just little finger circles. And this is just to create some mobility in the joints of the fingers. And I like to do about 10 of each of these. I'm not going to do 10 in each direction on each finger because that will take a little while. But this is nice to work up to. You may find that the first time you do this, it's not that easy. And you'll find some fingers are more coordinated than others. You may discover that you have real differences on the two different hands. Most of us are very dominant with one hand or the other, and will often be much more coordinated, maybe stronger than the other hand. So there's finger circles. Now, the next action of the fingers is flexion and extension. So working from flexion into extension. First, we just do this really simply. And I just like to curl the fingers in into really a tight flexion and then extend the fingers back into extension. So just moving like that really simply. Very often we're stronger in flexion, and we're designed to be stronger in flexion because we work with our hands all the time. So what I like to do here is focus on the balance into extension. That'll often help to create more balance around the hand and even up all the way into the elbow. So for this simple version is just with the hands on your knees or on the desktop, you can simply bring the fingers up into extension. And you can play with little rhythms here. You can do it in a mirrored way. See how I'm doing it, each finger at the same time in a mirror. Or you can play with coordination. So in this case, I'm going to lift up. I'm going to move in one direction and then the other. This is also working on the neurology, right? Working on your brain, trying to let your brain to coordinate the action of the fingers. If you were ever a musician of any kind, you've probably done something like this because being a musician is all about coordinating the fingers in different ways. So there we've worked on some extension. Now there's a nice tool that I like to use called the Handmaster Plus. This comes in different resistances, but I like to use this because this works on flexion and extension alternately and adds some resistance into the mix. So here I have my thumb in the bottom loop and I have my 4 fingers in the top loop. 2 options here. You can put these rings around the end of your fingers, the last ring in your fingertips called the distal phalanx, or you can put it closer up. The farther out it is, the harder this will be, the longer the lever. So I'm going to start all the way out, and I extend first. So I'm working on resisted extension through all of my fingers, and then flexion. So extending and flexing. This is working everything at once. It's a very efficient way to get some strength and balance through the flexors and extensors. And there's something about balancing those 2 actions that makes you actually able to do a little bit more. Okay? Now that's one way to do that. Version 2 is to squeeze this way, like a little duck quacking that way, instead of with the finger grip. This is a different kind of grip strength. And one of the things that we notice as people age is they tend to lose their grip strength. So working on grip strength is a very useful thing for really anybody, but particularly for your clients or yourself if you're not of the younger generation. Yeah? So we have flexion and extension with a tight grip or with a more open finger grip. Okay? So that works on flexion and extension of the fingers. Then we're going to work on a couple of other things. Yeah? So now my hand feels really nice and light and easy. That always just makes it feel like it just eases up tension patterns in there. A couple other things to add. The next thing I like to add here is some coordination exercises. And there's lots of ways to do this. You'll notice my right hand is way more coordinated than my left. I'm just trying to roll the balls over each other. These are, what you find in a gumball machine, right? These are just simple little rubber balls. And you see my right hand is really coordinated, my left hand not so much. So this is a way, again, to work the brain connection to the hand, which is quite profound. Our brain spends a lot of time figuring out what our hands are doing. Okay, so that's one nice way to do that. Now, the next thing I want to add here is some nice stretches. So one thing that can also happen is you can get very tight in your hands, again, from doing small work in a small range of motion, like we do on a keyboard, or even especially on something like a smartphone or a smaller device. So here what I like to do is, taking the fingers, I like to do a gentle squeeze into flexion. So you see I'm just taking them and folding them in just a gentle squeeze. You'll feel like that gets a little stretch across the joints of the fingers. And I just do a little bit of that. You can hold these for longer. I find I don't need to hold them for very long. I find I just go into the stretch and release, and that gives a lot of nice release into the hands. You may want to hold it and then release it. That's another option. Now you also want to do that with the thumb. The thumbs are particularly prone to getting a little bit tight. So here I'm going to work on just the thumb inflection. Notice how this doesn't make it as far as my fingers do. So it's a little bit tighter. That's not uncommon with the thumb. And again, I'm taking this in almost a rhythmic way. Yeah, just coming to the end range and then releasing. And I'm even pushing my fingers away slightly to make that a more dynamic stretch. Yeah, so now I've got a lot of flexion resistance. So I've opened up the joints of my fingers and my thumb. Next, I want to work on extension. And here what I'll focus on is just a gentle stretch on each finger. Just working through the whole range. You may find again here that some fingers have a lot more range of motion than others. Some have a lot of tension for whatever reason. Just depends on what activity you do, how you use your hands on the keyboard, that kind of thing. So now I've got some flexibility in my extensors and in my flexors. I also take that into my wrist. We didn't do these earlier. This is just a nice way to get some nice wrist mobility. Into extension, and then some nice stretches into wrist flexion. Whew. Now we'll finish here, again with our little balls. If you've ever been in a class where they had you roll your feet out on a ball, like a tennis ball, you can do the same thing with your hands. I like to take two, you can also take one of these smaller balls, and just roll them around the hand. So going into the base of the thumb, going through the whole palm. You can get both hands at the same time. You can't do that so well with your feet, right? I can take one if I want to and really target a particular area. Let's say you're sore on the base of your thumb or the pinky side of your hand. I can roll up between my fingers, or between, in this case, the metacarpals. I can take this and I can roll in the back of the hand too. Again, going between those metacarpals. There's not a lot there, but you might feel some releases. You can also use that up into the forearm, between the bones of the forearm, or on the palmar surface or the inner side as well. You'll often find some tight spots in there. So that's a nice way, again, to finish up your hand work, is to do a little bit of release work. Whoop, there we go. Ball down. That's why I have several of these, so just in case they go bouncing away. And now we've got that nice release work. So we've worked on all the actions of the fingers and the thumb, so flexion and extension, using some resistance, doing some stretching, some flexibility work, some coordination work with the balls, and then working into our stretches and working into, finally, some nice release work with the balls just to stimulate the hands. That is sequence 7 of our Active Office podcast series on the hands and fingers.